Hey, my name is Fadil.
I'm Matt.
I'm Hiram.
I'm Bashir.
Today we will be looking at evolution, how it came through natural selection, how organisms occupy niches, methods of speciation and its limitations. Matt, what can you tell us about evolution?
Evolution is the process by which new species are developed. Evolution happens because of natural selection. Individuals within a population that are better adapted to their environment will have a greater chance of surviving and passing on their traits to their offspring, making those traits more common and eventually changing the whole population. In order for natural selection to occur, there must be variation, competition, sexual reproduction, and the passing on of a successful genetic combination to the next generation. There are three types of selection which bring about changes in a population. Disruptive. Selection pressure towards the extremes creates two modal values. For example, the peppered moth can be either light or dark. During the Industrial Revolution, areas around cities became covered in soot. This meant that the dark peppered moths were better camouflaged in the cities and were less vulnerable to predation by birds, and the light moths became better camouflaged in the countryside. Stabilising. Selection pressure towards the centre increases the number of individuals at the modal value, cutting off the extremes. If a pigeon lays too few eggs, the chance of all the offspring dying is greater. But if it lays too many, there are too many offspring to feed. This creates a selection pressure to lay a medium amount of eggs. Directional. Selection pressure towards one extreme moves the mode in this direction. For example, giraffes with shorter necks couldn't reach the leaves of high trees, whilst giraffes with longer necks could. This meant long-necked giraffes had more access to more food, creating a selection pressure towards longer necks, and the average neck length grew longer.
Fadil, what is meant by an ecological niche?
The role that a species plays is called an ecological niche, such as what a species eats and where it lives in the environment. Environmental factors such as climate, elevation, and soil chemistry also plays a role in defining a niche. Sometimes other species will compete for the same niche as they may compete for the same food source or the same part of a habitat. The Nile crocodile lives in lakes and rivers in sub-Saharan Africa and catches prey by ambushing them when they come to drink. Nile crocodiles are anatomically adapted to this niche because they're camouflaged within muddy waters so prey can't see them. The nostrils, eyes and ears are situated on top of the head so the rest of the body can remain concealed underwater, again preventing prey from seeing them. In addition to save themselves from their prey's communicable diseases, Nile crocodiles have evolved into cold-blooded reptiles to gain a unique physiology that allows them immunity from many pathogens. This is because diseases that have evolved to thrive in their host physiology have difficulty in dealing with a physiology that is different. Being cold-blooded also allows crocodiles to go a long time without eating as they don't need energy to heat themselves.
What are allopatric and sympatric speciation, Hiram?
Speciation exists on a continuum from zero to complete segregation of diverging groups. The main methods of speciation are allopatric and sympatric speciation. Sympatric speciation is the evolution of a new species from a surviving ancestral species while both continue to inhabit the same geographic region. An example of this is the divergence of resident and transient orca forms in the Northeast Pacific. These two forms hunt different prey, have different diets, vocal behaviour and social structures. They inhabit the same waters, but avoid each other and do not interbreed. Allopatric speciation occurs when populations of the same species become geographically isolated from each other, preventing them from interbreeding. The populations then undergo genetic changes as they become subjected to different selective pressures and accumulate different mutations in separate gene pools. This eventually leads to the two populations becoming different species that can no longer breed to produce fertile offspring.
Oh, so this explains prezygotic barriers. It prevents members of different species from mating to produce a zygote, a single-celled embryo.
There are many different ways in which successful reproduction can be prevented, causing the formation of a new species. For example, hybrid sterility. This is when two parents contain different numbers of chromosomes which are unable to pair up during meiosis, and so the offspring cannot produce gametes. Example of this would be a mule. Behavioral isolation is a type of isolation where certain species will not mate due to cautious behaviors. This copulation cannot take place. This behavior can be based on appearances or mating rituals of the species. For example, a male firefly would only be able to mate with a female firefly who follow the same signaling pattern. Genitalia of the two groups may be incompatible. It may be physically impossible for the penis of the male mammal to enter the female's vagina. Development of the embryo may not occur. Despite fertilization taking place, further development may not occur. For example, when a sheep and a goat mate, they do produce an embryo, but the embryo dies off in the early stages. The biological concept of species is a group of organisms with similar characteristics that interbreed to produce fertile offspring. There are some limitations to the definition. Asexual reproduction is a type of reproduction in which offspring arise from a single organism and inherit to the genes of that parent only. It does not involve sex or fertilization. Another limitation to the definition of species is that it is limited to living species, where we can observe the interbreeding and the hybrids. It does not apply to fossil species because they are extinct and are no longer able to interbreed. Also, species that are considered different can produce reproductively capable hybrids offspring, such as polar bears and grizzly bears, even though we class them as different species.
In regard to asexually reproducing organisms such as prokaryotes, some species of bacteria are capable of passing genetic information between each other by swapping genes. Hence, defining species in a single-celled world is difficult.
Why is it difficult to assign organisms to any one species? Well, organisms are systematically grouped upon appearance, hierarchy, or phylogenetic relationships. Many animals share analogous features that look similar and the feature may fulfill a similar function but do not have the same origin. For example, the wings of bats and birds. Organisms are named using a binomial system, meaning they are named using its genus and species. This overcomes regional variations in naming, giving each species a universal name.
The main characteristics of the classification hierarchy are the morphological aspects. Organisms that look similar will be grouped into the same category and will be defined as a species. This can be from living specimens or from fossils. The biological aspects. This defines a species as a group of organisms with similar characteristics that can reproduce to form fertile offspring. And the genetic aspects. An organism's DNA is analysed and compared with samples from similar organisms. The degree of similarity determines how closely they are related.
The overall limitations to the classification hierarchy are 1. Finding evidence. If there are gaps in the fossil record, we may not be able to determine how closely related two organisms are. 2. When does a hybrid become a new species? 3. It doesn't account for asexual reproduction. 4. Sexual dimorphism. Two organisms of different sexes from the same species can look very different, but are still part of the same species. 5. Some species mimic each other. Two different species can look very similar due to one disguising itself as the other, yet they're still different species.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. This is Bashir.
Hiram.
Fadil.
Matt.
Signing out.
See you later.